Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Capital Improvement Program Committee to order. It's 7:06 p.m. on February 19th. Just a brief point of order. The agenda, and this is all my fault, didn't go out until yesterday on this one, so we're going to hold this one informational only. I apologize, Monday was a working holiday for me. And it wasn't on my radar, that the town office building will be closed. So, who are we missing? Is it just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Just Melissa?
Yeah.
And Steph?
Oh, and Steph, yeah.
So members, all members are present with the exception of Steph Summers and, Melissa McKinnon. So, meeting called to order, moving on, present to speak. There's nobody in the room, so we'll go online. If you're have anything you want to say, raise your hand, unmute, and then identify yourself. All right, seeing none, there'll be another opportunity later. So approval of minutes, we're gonna have to table. You do have the minutes from the 12th in your packets. We can't act on them tonight, so we'll save them, bring them with you next meeting, so I don't have to have Lisa print them again for you. And we'll act on them then. Chair status report, I've got nothing. We're gonna move right into the discussion today. So moving on to outreach and communications. All right, I sent you all in the meeting, you have it all in front of you too. Number of items, by way of outreach, we had been in conversing with the chair of the Board of Finance. It didn't make it on their agenda, so we don't technically formally have an agenda item tomorrow to just give an update on where the plan stands. We can make that decision whether, I mean, we have representatives on the Board of Finance. You guys
Yep.
can provide a general update if needs be rather than a formal presentation. As it comes up, but I'll be sure to make sure that, just make sure they know they can reach out if there's any questions.
Yeah.
Pete will be scheduled for the 3rd, your meeting on the 3rd, just to give an update.
Yeah,
We're not there by then.
you're already on the draft agenda.
Perfect. So again, we'll see where we're at, but that'll just be an interim, given that they're going for the Board of Finance on the 6th. Say, here's a snapshot, giving them the ability to ask questions, because it's ultimately their plan. And then they sent you some clarification. We mentioned when the land use request for the plan of conservation and development. As discussed last week, I reached out to Mike D'Amato. That $40,000 was a placeholder for them to do the work. Initially, you have that communication in there with the potential supplement for the following year of another $40,000 to $60,000 request if it were to go to fully to an outside consultant. That'll be subject to a recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission ultimately. So you have that one. I also sent you some supplemental documentation that was handed to us at the meeting from the library and the senior center, an additional quote for the senior center. And just a thank you from the library, as well as their handed summary of their 5-year plan, which to the best of my ability is captured in the sheet you have in front of you currently. But we can adjust from there.
May I make a suggestion that
Certainly.
when we invite these people to come visit us, the senior center and the library made me think of this last week, that we give them some kind of notice that we're looking for a 20-minute focused presentation on what they want, and that we hope that they can focus on stuff that's already on paper, not, it seemed that to me that there was some additional sitting there thinking about other stuff that they'd like someday that wasn't submitted with the paperwork. So it started to ramble. And I think that if we ask them to focus for 20 minutes, and I think that we can get a lot more accomplished.
That was the request.
Perhaps we should hold them to it.
Yeah. So. Again, and the hoping, I know they were both, not to speak for them, but, they're both
New
at
at
the
it,
process.
yes.
Yeah,
Well, that.
the hope is that we can, the hope is, yes, the hope is that we can help them or at least
Right.
work towards it in the off season, so that when we get down to next time, we have a defined set of requests, moving forward. There was one other thing, I sent you a follow-up from, Chief Moore related to the air containment system. They had the OSHA inspection following their presentation to us. Just a note that he thought that the request that they had for the air containment system will be adequate. I think it's $35,000. I think that's it. By way of
Just for
general,
clarification, that was for the exhaust from the vehicles out of the
correct,
bay.
yeah, it's station 213.
Thank you.
Sorry, just going through anything else for a second. Good for that. All right. So old business, I moved this up just to talk about it. Some of you were in the room. I mentioned last week that I had been asked to personally come in by Phil, the Board of Ed, and just discuss something I have been working on related to long-term bonded planning strategy. You have a copy of that presentation in your packet. That meeting, I believe, was recorded, so it was an hour ago. I'd like to not rehash it. You're welcome to record, so watch it on YouTube, but I do want to point out basically the whole approach or my thought process was, and what I think Phil picked up on as a potential opportunity for the Board of Ed and how to plan for large scale projects that we haven't done it historically. Just the idea of savings over time and looking at it as a long-term plan versus just a year one, and how they kind of interrelate. What happens in year one can impact what happens in later years, and vice versa. If you're planning for something big in the future, it will impact year one now. But kind of what I've been trying to work towards or talk through here is just that we need to start trying to plan, or suggesting that we start trying to plan and have the conversation of planning long term for these major projects in some way, shape, or form, to make it more gradual in impact over time, and to also start to plan for some of these projects that have been on the plan for decades. So take a look at it. We can discuss it more over future meetings as we evaluate the plan and transfers and where we wind up being. But yeah, hopefully we can continue the conversation. Any other questions on that? Has anybody had a chance to take a look at it before I jump on? It's worth watching the recording just to get a feel for the discussion with the Board of Ed. When it comes out tomorrow, the next day, whenever that happens.
I just want to say I agree. It is worthwhile to watch the recording because the slideshow in isolation is not necessarily the best way to get the information, for me anyway. It was helpful for me to sit through the presentation and understand it better. So I feel like if you were able to do that, it would be helpful to further discussions in the future.
All right, thank you, Jen.
Mm.
The only, I put it under capital planning strategies because I had put some outreach. Pete and Christina, you have that correspondence in your packet. I reached out to Donna initially and Christina looking for guidance as to any documentation we had related to historical success for pursuing steep grants. How many we've gotten, given that they are very competitive. So Christina provided some feedback. I had also reached out to Shannon and your office, Pete, just to see if there's any way of tracking, what we've managed to accomplish over 15 years, from the steep's perspective. Largely because I know we have a number of projects that are potentially eligible for steep funding, all of which will be competing, and they're one at a time. And they are capped at a value. So
And you can't get one until you.
And you can't get one until you finish the other.
The other, yes.
So largely because while we can flag things for Steve, this is another, from a planning perspective, I think. Again, it becomes, we need to approach it as to how do we actually fund or get to funding these things and what's the long-term strategy? Because relying on Steve for all of it is likely not viable.
Yeah, Steve is really just a bonus. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a way. It's not to do
And there's a
that.
couple others out there that like the urban planning grants. Believe it or not, we're urban.
Yeah, the urban action grant, the one for the scope
Yeah,
and village.
Yeah, and then there's a couple more out there that, you know, the problem is that. Best way to get those is to hire a full-time grant writer. And
Mhm.
can't hire people fast enough now.
Yeah, no, and I guess that's exactly it, but you know, grants are a bonus. We should pursue them.
Yes,
when
we should.
can.
I think that. What I've always thought about doing on this, and I'm not sure I can pull it off, is to regionalize grant writing. And it means talking to people, talking real nice to people.
Well, but we're competing.
We're competing with the towns that we're
Yeah.
regionalizing with, but
Yeah,
still. You get a
and they
really
all
good
have
grant
town
writer.
managers.
Yes,
And they know how to work it better than we do.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's how it is.
Yeah, and that's, so just for consideration as we look at this plan, I don't really know, Pete, honestly, in retrospect, understanding how competitive it is, if there's much value, I don't think we have the data readily accessible, so what we've been awarded. How worth it is.
the only one that I'm currently aware of is the one for the old town hall. That was granted in 2020. And we are spending the end of it now.
It'll take a while.
I think we just signed the last contract for the money.
And I can tell you, Jim, when I first became first selectman, it was 2009. And we had gotten a grant to do the River Road Park.
Yeah.
And like one of the first things that I had to do was like approve it and start it and so that was 2009. Then we applied for Turnpike Road and we got, I think, 2 steep grants to do that. Which was like $1 million in the end. So that took years and years and years to do, but I think those are the only 2 that, and then when I was leaving, we were trying to get the end of that, the leftover money from Turnpike Road, we were trying to repurpose it. And I think it might have gone to the old town hall. I'm not
I think
sure.
that was a separate steep grant. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It was only 120.
Salsha was the easy thing to do because it was through the Department of Transportation. And so if we could find a project that was DOT, then but I don't know what happened to that, really.
The other problem is that when you get these
Yeah.
grants, the state management of the grant is. Kind of a headache, and. I mean, right now, I'm pretty lucky because Heather down at DPW is actually pretty agile with that stuff.
Yeah. But so what you do is when you apply for it, or at least this is how you speak, when you apply for it. They'll say, okay, this is a road, so Department of Transportation will administer this one. And then if you don't use it all up, you have to appeal to them to use it on something else. But like the Old Town Hall is probably not DOT, it was probably, I don't know. I don't know which agency, but some of the agencies are easier to work with than others. And the hoops you have to go through are different and. It's a journey. It's a journey and you don't know where you're going until you're there.
Yeah,
So,
just wandering in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Yeah, so from that perspective, grants are a bonus, but not, not in any way to be relied on. To solve all the projects we have on here.
However, there's some projects that I think that's probably the way to solve them, only because they're big money and the tax dollars aren't there.
Yeah, we have to approach it or plan for it long term. So with that said, new business, you see the first pass of the full plan as submitted, to the greatest extent possible. And I don't know what's easier for you guys, but perfectly with those following along on the screen, it might be worth sharing. What I do want to do for this purposes of just transparency is show you what came off this list from the last one. Because it was either closed or. Oh, can you open sharing, Christina?
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
The first two pages, the new print, or first three pages, I guess.
First three pages are the first three pages, yes. First two are the 5-year plan, top to bottom, to make it more legible. And then that's kind of a 10-year summary, kind of projecting forward, it gives you the 5-year totals and the 10-year totals. I also included a copy of the approved plan from last year, just as a point of reference if anybody needs it.
All right,
So let me just,
that's the last two pages.
the last few pages of the last year's
Thank
approved
you.
plan. Just so that we had it for reference, so you didn't have to pull it up. Let me see, I think we want this. Let me see if I can make this big enough that it actually works. All right, so just going through these, I have crossed out, and I'll just tell you what I crossed out if you can't read that on the screen. Plumbing repairs at both schools were completed. I pulled out the ventilation projects because that grant reimbursement is no longer valid. It's not there, those projects they're not that, and there was no request. The only, same thing with the solar panels. I pulled out those two projects because they're not on the radar currently, specifically from the schools. I did keep the roof projects on there largely just to track it, and because it is we know how important a talking point it is in the community. But again, the 12 mil bond request from last year was not renewed. The only thing I'm unsure of that I kept on this list was the ramp. The request was not renewed. It was a year 3 request last year, I believe. So that's still on your plan in front of you. Moving on, you'll see, as we talked about it last meeting, we similar what we did for the school building committee, the emergency services facilities building committee. The bond and their funding is tracked separately there. I pulled out ambulance payroll, moving on to EMS, because we had talked about potentially that being a budgetary item, and given the Fund 17 need, we can put it back if need be. But I took a best guess at that. Turnout gear was also pulled. That was moved to operating budgets last year, so it's no longer valid. The public works, the first line item under public works. I believe that lease payment, Donna, you can confirm the 2018 public works dump and chipper, that payment is done. It's not, it'll be in your old planner on your screen. It's not. So that was pulled off the list because that lease payment is done. I also pulled the street sweeper out because that was purchased. Overhead doors to go to the DPW garage. That's a closed project. I pulled the 2026 bond, or formal line item for the 2026 bond payment for Liska and Schofield. That is now tracked separately because they've been repackaged under the Urban Action Grant and resubmitted separately. So they're tracked now according to the current requests.
I just have to move because I can't see.
And then the security at the town office building piece. That's done. That's complete. So those came off the list.
Oh, okay.
So now moving on to the current list. So what you have in front of you is the projects as submitted, and I'm going to stop during this and just bring up the other list so we can edit live if we need to. If I can find it. All right. So now welcome to today's list. I've highlighted some fields just for my own knowledge on here because I have questions about them. The ramp project. Jen, I don't know if you know if that's still an active consideration.
I don't remember off the top of my head. I apologize.
No, that's fine. I will, I'll reach out to Phil. It is now year 2. It was pushed to year 3 last year. I don't recall how urgent that was. It wasn't resubmitted, but I kept it in here so I don't have to re-find it again. Yeah, I don't remember. Does anybody know what the scope of that project was?
Mm-mm.
It's
It
like
was
that?
to replace the entire ramp. Public Works patched it a couple of years ago. As best they could, but I was down there the other day, it's not in good shape.
The accessible, it's the only.
It is, you know, it's a big, long concrete ramp on the outside of the both ends of the building.
So yeah, I kept the roof project on here, although it's in that prior approved total, just as a tracker, it doesn't show up in the 5-year summary, so there are no school projects on here beyond the ramp. The line 4 annual transfer, the request from the Board of Ed was the fund level with last year, so that would change. I carried the 1375 that was approved last year. The transfer to town is what we had in year 2 in last year's plan, so that tracked forward. There's $1 million in there. We can adjust those as we go, as well as the out years.
I have a question.
Sure.
I wonder. I'm confused about the spreadsheet in general, but why is the 1375 not in the total Board of Ed? Like why doesn't it go down?
What do you mean?
Like in every year.
Because we had no funding to Board of Ed captured in last year's plan. Yeah, this is,
We didn't?
we did not.
I'm looking at
After
25,
this one.
26, year 1. I see the starting projected balance is 1.
No, that's the transfer for this year is 1375. The projected balance I carried forward, so we understood how much was in that account already. That 2375 is the active balance in that account,
Where's 2375? I'm not seeing it.
prior approved.
I'm sorry, I don't see
Line
it.
up,
Line,
column up, I mean, sorry.
F4.
So this is, so last year, I thought year 1 would have 500,000 to the schools, but then also the bond payment of $1 million.
Correct,
And then the bond payment would be every year, $1 million.
correct.
So, but that's not here now.
Yeah, the bond, they haven't requested a bond for 12 million. That was hypothetical based on those projects. Bill's request. As presented, was the whole, the transfer of 1375.
So
There's
You
a
would
bonded
trans-
project out there. We don't know what it is, and we can discuss how we want to capture that.
yeah, okay,
I didn't want to prejudge it or pre-submit
Yeah.
anything.
I still, so what would a total Board of Education be if there was requests, that would be where those, in that brown tan line, that's where those would go?
Correct, that's where the total would go.
Okay.
I think though, like, if we were gonna add a bond payment, it would need to be another row,
Correct.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
So. I thought, see, last year, we had. Bond payments, this fiscal year is 26 to 29, so this $1 million was showing up. And then adding it into the total.
Oh,
So he's saying because they didn't ask for it, we didn't put it in.
We know
there.
there's a project there. I just don't know what it is. You know.
Or how much.
Or how much it is. If. That's something we can put a placeholder for, if we don't hear. You know, more direction from the Board of Ed as to what they think. We don't have the direction as to what project you guys are
Yes.
trying to pursue.
that's correct.
So I don't want to prejudge that.
Correct.
We can decide if. As a group, if there's a need to capture something, because we know there's probably a significantly bonded project in there somewhere. It's subject to discussion. It's just not carried yet. Nor is a recurring transfer beyond this year for the schools, so it zeroes out because that's what happened in the old plan. From year 2 on. So the only school transfer to Fund 04, capital reserve for the schools is this year currently. And it was held at the same value as last year. For initial discussion. That's a bigger item to unpack, so let's go down, I think, and do some of these other ones first, and we can talk about long-term and how we want to approach this comprehensively, down the road. Emergency Services Facilities Building Committee, what I've done here, the prior approved column shows their $200,000 in funding, of which about 160,000 is uncommitted. Just a little bit. Using the same, the school's bond data, that they came up with in December, we kind of tracked out what the payments would be for a 7.5 million note. Anticipating that hits in 26-27, year 2 currently. Again, this is all subject to discussion. That transfers to a bond payment for a $15 million bond of about a $1.4 million bond payment annually.
I don't see the bond payment.
So line 38,
Oh,
I don't know, I'm asking.
Line 12. 15 million.
Roll.
General
okay.
obligation bond.
Okay.
Row R.
Correct.
Wait a minute,
You in the old sheet or the?
I'm on the old sheet.
So we captured the actual, those are the payment values. We carried, like we discussed at the last meeting, what I did was captured the value of the bond or the note in the title.
Yep.
And the actual payment or what would hit the budget is what's carried through.
Can you remind me what
General obligation.
general obligation, yes. I need to put that down.
And they show up as 910, so those are recurring payments in the selectmen's budget. Because that's what they would be. The thing I will note is what I've done here just to track stuff out. If you look at the 10-year summary page. Using that same methodology. That. Understanding there's interest accrued in that. The local fund pending year 6 through 10, that's the balance of what that bond payment would be. For the life of the bond.
Mhm.
So the total on a $15 million bond is roughly $21.5 million over the span of the bond. It's not gonna happen in 10 years, but it's. Just to give you a sense of what those long-term commitments are. And we can do that when we get to capture a school project as well. So the $15 million bond plus interest at the rates that the school did, at the rates the school recent bond summary provided, that's roughly the total cost of town over the life of the bond. That's it for total for emergency services utilities building committee for the time being. Moving on to EMS. Donna, I've highlighted row 14, the ambulance lease payment. That previously said through 2030 because we were supposed to start that 2 years ago, and I don't think it happened until this year, so I pushed it to 2032. Assuming that refurb hits this year and we're paying a lease on it.
Yes.
Okay. So starting this year, that refurb, the ambulance starts to kick in. I have that shown as Fund 17 currently, and I will extend through till beyond the 5 years of this plan. The next line is an existing lease that payment that is committed to Fund 17 that extends the duration of this plan currently. about $12,000, so there's about $60,000 committed in recurring payments coming from Fund 17 currently. There is service, so new for 2025 is Service 213 replacement. That is in there in year
3.
thank you. $80,000. I have that being fully funded out of Fund 17 currently. An $80,000 ad, there's about $550,000 in that account. I should note this, Donna, I had asked, we don't have fund balances or actual fund balances yet,
Only for Fund 4,
only for Fund 4.
no, it's only for 17.
Okay, so I don't have table 2 working yet. That's what it boils down to, because I need a starting point and then we can. And also, quite frankly, we're gonna change what fund some of these things come out of, so it's all gonna change anyway. Survey and engineering, the next 2 lines. This was combined previously. For 17 and 18, they were submitted, and because we're tracking the CIP numbers now. They were submitted as 2 separate projects. One was $10,000 for a survey at the 25 Old Farms Road site. The other was design and engineering at the 25 Old Farms site. I've just split them. They're still in there. They're the same 110,000 we've been talking about. Requesting closing, all that fun stuff. So they're still carried as the prior pending because they haven't been spent, they haven't been approved. What you'll see is that request was renewed for the current year for $200,000 of additional design and engineering at the 25 Old Farms Road site. So it shows up as both prior and now a new request for the current year. And my thoughts on this is that this should really be a request from the Board of Selectmen or the Emergency Services Facilities Building Committee. Rather than additional funding control or directed by the fire departments. So we can decide what we want to do about that. Whether we move it, whether we hold on it, whatever the case may be, we can discuss that as we go. Same thing, the next line, the fire, station 13. That $80,000 is just prior spending, no change there, we're just tracking it as unspent. Parking lot replacement, Old Farms, 24 Old Farms. There was $35,000 committed but not spent from your budget sheet from last year. There's new request for this year for $65,000 more to complete that project.
Which project, I'm sorry?
Parking lot replacement at 24 Old Farms,
Okay,
Wellington Health. That was covered by 930 out of the selectmen's budget initially, so I carried that through for the sake of
all right.
convenience. We can discuss that at another time. As we look at where these fund balances go. Roof replacement, 24 Old Farms is a year 3 request. $70,000, so that's just in there. Again, I have that 930, we could try to fund it from Fund 04. I don't know where the balances lie, so we can look at it later. The next 2 are questions I have, Donna, because I didn't have an answer. The driveway apron repair from Fund 17 at Station 13 at $30,000 in prior committed. That has not been spent. I don't know if that's going to be spent. Row 22. That has not, they haven't done anything on that,
We
right?
haven't done anything, we actually tore it up, so.
Okay. So there's 30,000 that was allocated out of Fund 17. I don't know.
What, you tore it up, what?
Yeah, we didn't know where the drainage pipes went.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so we had to dig a hole, to find out where the pipes went.
Needless to say, I don't think we're replacing that
And
apron.
that apron, if it gets replaced, is gonna get replaced with the building.
Yeah. So this is another one of those items that I think would be a
Yeah.
request of the fire department to say, yes, okay to release, because it's not gonna get done. And that would be positive fund balance and fund 17. That's my suggestion. Um. Hydraulic rescue equipment I left in there. I wasn't sure whether that was ever done, Donna. I
It was
believe that,
done and paid for.
perfect. So this actually gets crossed off the list. I will pull that, because it is no
Isn't
longer.
that the one
part of
that's
it.
a new color, like pink or something?
Another late fee,
Is that blue?
Can I ask a question then? I mean, so if a project is done, I know that we've hashed this out before, but I'm still not sure I'm clear on it, so. If Stuart, if you weren't here, we wouldn't know that that was done. So Donna, like, what's the procedure for folks to let you know? When things are done?
Check the budget against the expenditures. If it's fully expended, it's closed. If there's a balance, then I inquire about the project and is it done? Or is the balance going to be spent? And if the project manager says, we're not finished yet, we're going to spend it, then I hold it as an open project.
Okay, and what's the time lapse for that? Like, how often is that checked on?
I check on it once a year at CIP time.
Okay,
No, oh, so you're just stretching.
Go with me. In this case, we spent every last penny and then some. So there was no payments.
Yeah, so if it's been completed, it doesn't need to kind of stay on there again, this prior years is just to placeholder, understand why. So we can follow up, so Donna has the opportunity to check, see where things stand at the start of the year, and if we have to make a change or additional funds are needed, or whatever the case may be. Sorry. I was looking at something in the background. I was gonna give her a chance. All right, so next up, squad 113 refurbish. Current year one request for $250,000. We have the balance in Fund 17. I carried it as a direct payment. Just pay for it in full out of Fund 17. We don't need to do that. We can capture it as a recurring payment. That is subject to
There is
discussion.
no new VIN number, so to speak, it's simply a refurbishment of what's there, so you cannot lease it. You can borrow cash outright from somebody or pay for it in full.
So maybe that is the way to go about it then, is just assume it's being paid for out of Fund 17.
The ambulance is different because you get a new cabin chassis and a new VIN number, that's what the leasing company requires. Now, depending on the fund balance, on 17, maybe.
So that one's only been on for 3 years, right? It was requested in 23, 24.
If I have that right, yes, some of these are a little hard to track in the system, but
Yeah. And now it's in year 1. And there's nothing else?
they
That-
they have an ambulance, which.
Yeah, that's a, but. Oh, yeah, and then the service 213.
Yeah, they have something, year 3, right?
Yeah,
They have the truck replacement, they have the refurbished squad 113, and then they have the new ambulance, which is a year 3 request.
mhm.
It was submitted as 850,000. Through discussion, they identified it as 1.2. I have not done, we have to talk about how we think we want to handle that when we have a better handle on fund balances. The lease payment on that is about $150,000 a year.
Wow.
So we have 60,000 a year committed already, coming out of Fund 17. Their annual transfer in isn't going to cover that all, but there's probably a game where some of it, some balance of Fund 17 is applied to reduce the cost of that. But we have to work through what the plan is and what the Fund 17 balance is, because once we hit that, we start to get into issues with
Mm.
priority being an ambulance replacement if needed. And there's also three other pieces of equipment that we can track on this list that I would say we should for the out years at least.
Yeah.
That are 40-year-old trucks.
Well, what service 213?
The pickup truck.
Oh, that's why it's only 80K.
Yep.
Got it.
And that's why I just captured it as I mean, we can do a lease, it's not a hell of a lot. But again, the committed payments are for 7 years, if we get stuck with
Still
a big hit.
$8,000 from pickle truck.
At least, that's what,
I know.
yeah, that's what Phil's SUV was.
So because they weren't submitted, we don't have them in 5 years, there are 3 trucks that are. I think we should at least track them
Yeah.
as
Yeah,
expenses, and I can add those 3 for
we just,
potential
we
replacements.
can't have
in the
things
year.
showing up 3 years from when we need to do it.
The other concern is there's a 3-year lead time on these trucks.
Mhm.
And I think. You know,
According to the New York Times, it just went to 5.
there you go.
Crazy.
There's
New
3
York Times
manufacturers.
article on fire equipment that came out yesterday. Saying that, explaining why the interest rates on them is exploded and why the lead time is so far in advance.
That's an article the other day saying there's like 3 manufacturers in the country that manufacture all the fire trucks.
Yeah, there used to be like 20 and then they consolidated and the consolidated people hope to find economy and scale and they didn't because every fire department wants a custom bespoke truck.
Yeah.
And they're still running separate factories.
Yeah.
Now, there is one investment group that owns 5 ambulance brands, 4 of which are built in the same factory under different names.
You know, it really matters with that.
So I mean. From my perspective, the departments are doing everything they can to stretch the life out of these things. But at some point, we have to like. Work towards it, and a 5-year lead time. Can you, I don't know if they can be down a truck, you know, like it's so, we have to, I don't know how to accommodate that. Other than to say we need to figure out a way to put towards it, as a long-term need.
I mean, the example of that 1.2 million for rescue 149 replacement, you know, they may need to commit the money in year 3. But if they're lucky, the first payment might not be until year 5 or 6.
And that's my concern is, I mean, if they really,
But the commitment has to come earlier or you don't get mine.
yeah, or does it have to come earlier than what it's been submitted? And if we have 3 trucks that are 40 years old, you know, that aren't even on this list yet. That may not be in a 10-year plan because it takes 5 years to get them if they're requested in year 6. What happens then? It's an answer I don't have. So, I mean, you guys have stretched the lives out of these things. Which is great, and I applaud it,
But there's a price to be paid at the end.
but I don't know, you know, it's gonna get near the point where. You guys are gonna be down a truck for an extended period of time, we're gonna pay for extensive repairs. While we wait for a new truck. Or commit to a new truck, at any rate. Food for further thought, I just wanna get through this first one and if we can digest however we want to. Moving forward. Air containment system, I talked about, communications, that $35,000. Will hold, I forget what year it is, year 1. That is urgent, that will be your own request, Pete, I have that in your budget currently, we probably can pay for it out of Fund 4 as well.
I'm sorry, what line are you on?
Line 25, the air containment system, that has to get done. I just figured I carried it as a your budget line item currently, because that's what we did for the parking lot.
Yep.
We can play with those numbers as we advance. All right, so that's the extent of EMS currently. Public Works, we have 5 committed recurring payments that hit your budget. In line 311. But it's the same thing as line 910 for recurring payments, it's just a recurring debt obligation. It's just a Public Works specific. Recurring debt obligation, so there are those 5, they phase out. Where are we? Year 4, we lose some, we lose 1 in year 3, we lose more in year 4 and 5. But they exist, and they're a commitment they have new roadside mower on the list. That was for this year. The lease payment on that would be $17,000 based on information Donna's provided via calculator that she uses to approximate these. And that would be 7 years. That's the $103,150 mower with attachments. So that's a year one, that's a lease. That'll hit the budget.
That's a passive.
The,
And just to confirm, that's another one that we did not have on the list last year.
it was not on the list last year, not correct. That was it, so. There's a lot of vehicles that probably should, and that's what I'm saying, like, we need to be tracking these 10 years, so we can ask about them, if they're not on the plan currently. So that we can make a point of saying, should this be on the list, or
Right.
are you never gonna replace it? The propane heaters, the DPW garage, that's a year two request. Why do I have that as 910? That should not be 910.
I thought that was the year one. Because they only have two right now that work.
Well, they don't use, it's not their primary heater, they have the oil. It's, hey, it could be a year one request. They requested a year two, this is just the way they submitted it, we can, assign value.
It doesn't.
All right, so then we get into some of the big roadway. So what I've done is each of these road projects, and there are 3 of them. You'll see that there's separate planning and engineering lines and construction line. So lines 35 and 36 are the first one, that's Village Hill Road Drainage Phase 1. Planning and engineering is $50,000. Pete, but again, I just have that flag to 9:30, we can do whatever we want with it. I don't know what we have in Fund 04 yet, because we haven't decided what we're transferring. I flagged the Village Hill construction as a grant because we have it, and that's the whole purpose of it. UAG is a new addition for me because we didn't track this grant previously. Urban Action Grant. That's the $2 million grant that we have. They anticipate that Village Hill project to be $750,000, fully paid by that grant, which is great. Next year, hopefully. And if anything changes, Pete, you'll let us know.
I hope so,
So we're just on the hook this year for engineering somehow. $50,000 to get that to be contracted next year using grant funds. The salt shed. I noted a steep grant eligible because it is. That is a 1.5 request in year 2. I think I pushed it to year 2 because of our discussion. I want to say that it was submitted in year 1.
We were supposed to get updated information, right, when the architect went out to see it or something?
Yes,
Yeah,
that request came in at 1.5. They think it might be $800,000 with the reduced scope. If I
Right.
remember that conversation. If it's a steep grant project, we'd be on the hook for 20% of it. Again, it's whether it's a steep, whether we rely on a steep grant project is great. We can try for it. This is one that's been on there forever, and it's a decision, do we actually try to start, do we try to plan for it? What do we do? I don't think it's gonna be 1.5, I think we can safely probably reduce it to 800,000.
Because if they reduce the size.
Because they were gonna reduce the size, and that seemed pretty confident, if you guys think that's right, we'll do that. In the absence of any other information.
Well, I was pretty excited to hear Troy talking about the fact that they could probably do it for $800,000, and I
Yeah.
think that we should just,
Commit to that.
yes, I think. I don't know anything about salt sheds, 1.5 million for a salt shed seems.
It-
like a lot.
for a tent.
It does, and I think he sounded cognizant, they were cognizant of it.
It is one for excavation.
So. Whether or not that's, well, we can debate whether that's. Whether we assume that's just gonna be grant funded, or whether we wanna capture that as a, we can run a bond payment on that. to figure out what we think that would be to complete that project, or as part of a larger bond.
The salt shed,
Yeah,
and just leave it on the bond. We got enough bond issues. Let's not add another bond issue.
yeah, you know, they talked about that MS4 compliance and being, you know,
Yes.
hey,
We have lots of compliance issues.
no. For now, I'll identify it as steep, but that would take steep off the table for any of the other road projects.
And it also might take Steve off the project for the animal control facility. We're still not sure where we're at with that. So it's a, yeah. Regionalization with 2 towns is nigh on difficult. You make it 5 and it gets real complicated real fast.
We'll get to that when we get down here. I think you had submitted it in year 1 again. I didn't change it drastically. Where the hell is it?
You're,
Animal control.
I thought I put that in year 2.
We talked about it. If that's still the
Yeah,
plan, I will.
I would prefer to
Oh,
have
no, I
that.
did move it to you, Joe. I
Good.
moved it to you 2 for you already. I apologize.
Thank you, because there's no way,
Where is the animal control?
Animal controls on the selection.
Oh, I see,
Page 2.
55.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I moved that to year 2. I have it showing up as Fund 04 currently, so. We'll probably want, if it is a year 2 project, we're gonna wanna make sure we have some balance in there for it. But sorry, going back up. To, where were we? There are a couple other public works items, the salt shed, that's steep grant. New loader, that is a year 1 request, that 38,000 lease payment. For a $235,000 loader.
And that was requested
That-
23, 24.
Yes. Replaces the 2006 piece of equipment. There's a lot of requests between year 1 and year 2 in public works, so that's where the bulk of where your total spending is gonna wind up being. As we look down at the bottom line numbers, the dump truck. Was also submitted as a year 1 to be on their schedule. That's a $50,000 lease payment for 7 years for a $300,000 truck. The next 2 are Schofield. The Schofield Road project. This is the other urban action grant eligible one. There is again a planning and engineering component, and then a bonded or residual project cost component. This is submitted as a $500,000 design and engineering for year 2. I don't know whether it's going, this is line 40, sorry. That is something out of pocket to the town, so that's either a Fund 04 or that's a direct hit to the budget in Pete's budget next year. I show 1.25 of that is the balance of the urban action grant that isn't covered by Village Hill. So we assume that. Of that $3 million project, we're losing 1.25 of it, so we are bonding 1.75 million, which is $162,000 payment in the next year. For 20. So we cut some of the funding off of that, but there's still, that's what the balance looks like after the grant we have in hand. Next one is Liska. That again is an engineering. In year 2, that's $300,000. Planning and engineering. $2 million project, the bond payment on that. Is more than the balance. It's $185,000 a year for 20 years. And that $2 million, it's greater than the 1.7, than the $3 million Schofield project, because we're only bonding 1.7 million, 1.75 million. Schofield. Those are 20-year commitments on both of those. Without additional support. Stormwater treatment, actually, hold on, I had a question on that before I move on. Donna, Schofield Road, going back to Schofield, there was a hanging request. From LoSiP, 35,000.
Yes.
I don't, what where does that stand? Is that something that,
I think that was a quickie overview engineering study of, you have this many feet of road, this many catch basins, it was whatever 35 could afford, but what the general scope of the work would need to be done on that.
I plugged it in there because I was unsure, because it had showed up as a Schofield Road drainage line item in previous plans.
I don't know if it'd been awarded to anybody or not.
And go to town meeting for appropriation.
I do not know.
Can we just, I guess, check on it as a hanger?
Yes,
You get a chance. It's not hitting the budget. I just don't know if we have $35,000 in what's available. That wasn't spent. That maybe we can use towards something else. Or if it's complete, let's just get rid of it. All right, so speaking of low SIP, that's what flagged my mind on at the next line 44 is the stormwater treatment chamber. That's 45, that's a year, that was year 2 previously, we had pushed it, it's been there a long time. I think, or it's been there for a couple of years, it would be a year 1 project this year. I think it was requested that way, I think LoSiP can cover it, we've been talking about it for a while. That's where it stands. Bus lot paving. That's a year 3 request, same thing, I have it flagged below SIP currently. I think that would be eligible for LoSiP. All right, library, this is one, I highlighted all of these on my list, because I even mean. What I've entered in here is the best I could, I sent you their supplemental correspondence. That did a better job of outlining, well, clarifying what the requests were, but they're still very open-ended and very wishy-washy. Because they have a lot of unknown costs that they hadn't flagged yet. What I've entered in here is I prioritize them based on their what years 1 through 5. The entryway gutters, I flagged at 80,000 because front and rear gutters, that's the max. I don't know if LoSiP will cover it. I flagged all of these to LoSiP currently. We get about $60,000 a year annually to cover projects. We have a small balance. I don't know what it is. But the other value, so year 2 is the building envelope, that's the exterior painting, shingle repair, windows, yada, yada, yada. And I just tracked them down, flooring in the community room, that was a $21,000 ask. Interior paint, walls and doors was the next one, 71,000, and then they had a new roof assessment. Understanding their roof replacement somewhere in the years, 5 years to follow is likely gonna happen, which we probably should track as well. As we'd be guessing at an assigned value to it though.
Does anybody on the committee remember in past years whether we've been asking if basic maintenance is a capital improvement or not? Painting, washing windows.
There was some discussion, they actually came in one year, I believe, for a air conditioning compressor replacement, the one that's on the rear of the building. And not, I don't think they understood the timeline, what CIP takes. Then in the end, they just took it out of the maintenance budget to replace it. It was well under 10,000 anyways. And I said, well,
And they have in the last couple of years increased their operating budget for
Right.
maintenance.
That, because I remember this discussion around the senior center, I think, for like interior painting. Whether
And
that's
schools, for years, we used to put
Right.
schools in,
for under CIP instead of under maintenance.
yeah,
yeah, they were
Carpets as well,
referred
I
to
think.
classrooms a year for just over $10,000, where they put rugs in and paint it. And
Yeah.
they did that with CIP for years.
You can paint a room, I'd say that's operating budget if you're really refreshing the.
Right, but if you're gonna cut-
Library.
what was happening is they were cutting their budget and using it on other things and
Gotcha.
not doing the painting and not doing the carpeting. And then suddenly we had to do a ton of carpet. So that was why that happened, but.
Jim, when you get a chance, got a hand up.
Yeah, I mean, you can wait till the, or rather keep going. We'll see you, we'll get to you at present to speak at the end. Yeah, so
Well, wasn't that more of a philosophical
Yeah.
discussion? because of
Yeah, and
that?
it would be in one year and then out the next year, then
Yeah.
it's just been a hot potato.
And the same thing with the bunker gear for the fire department.
Bunker
Yeah.
gear,
You know, you $20,000,
breathing apparatus,
but it's a routine.
recurring.
Yeah.
Recurring expense.
Recurring replacement expense.
we talked about it a lot last year. I think again with reading it with the turnout gear, right?
Yeah.
And that if it's an annual, you know, if it's an annual replacement item, we should be budgeting for it rather than it show up as a annual $10,000 CIP item.
Yeah,
I still think that's the way to go.
yeah, technically, yes.
But
Keep in mind, many years the Board of Finance would ask it to go back to CIP.
Yes,
And CIP would
No,
ask it to go to the Board of
but
Finance.
that's because that way they'd have to come up with the money.
Yes.
So,
yeah, so I mean, it's either way, it's gonna be paid for. Should it hit the
Well,
budget side or does it hit the?
The thing is that we can't control if it is paid for. We can't,
That's true.
so if it goes in the operating budget, the Board of Finance can cut it. Or it can pass through and they can decide not to spend it and say, you know what, we'll just wait till next year and use this money for something else. And all of that has happened. It just depends on who's there, what the money is, what the money's for. And who cares the most about whether or not it happens or not. Really. So it's just a control thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say. Try to stick to a consistent policy, at least from this perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
Where it falls,
Mhm.
if they ignore it, then the Board of Finance gets to crack down why.
Yeah, but if, you know, if it were,
I get it,
I know.
um. So we can decide what we wanna do about the library, if we wanna shift stuff around, if we really have a year one project, I have, Donna, we had a project from LoSiP, building envelope repairs, I honestly can't recall. Which is why I have it in there for prior spending in line 49. But some of it, I just don't know where it fell and how much was spent at LoSiP. What that project actually entailed, some of it went to ARPA,
Yeah, so they
so.
did the RFP and they included that in the RFP. That, that they used for ARPA for the retaining walls as well. So they asked for all of it. And I don't know where they're at with it.
I
Do
only,
you know anything?
I don't know anything about the building envelope.
I only highlighted it here because just check, that's one of those things, I have no idea if they even know how much was spent. Or how much of that is carrying forward into these other projects and it.
this is one of those, I can't remember the phrase, the people who just get a lump of money. From the budget, the library, fire departments,
Special revenue fund.
yeah. Where. It's like the Board of Ed, we give them a lump of money and then they spend it. And how exactly they spend it is up to them.
Well, in this instance, it's supposed to be for a set of defined,
Yeah, it's
Yes.
supposed to be for this building envelope stuff.
but
Yeah.
come to think of it.
I think
that
they
ever go to
haven't
town
done,
Meeting?
No, didn't.
So then-
I think they haven't done it yet. I think they went out to bid when they did the ARPA thing. And they're probably waiting for the spring. And at that point, they're gonna come to Donna and say, okay, we wanna spend this money, and then we're gonna say, you need to have a town meeting.
So to that end, I think it's another item just to follow up on and say, hey, this appears, I believe that is all carried in their new 5-year requests that we're tracking.
We'll do that.
Like, I think the work covered by that is now in these other current 5-year projects. So that might be something that will never get spent and just needs, I don't know how to follow up on it, I guess it's my.
I'm concerned with their price quote on the gutter thing, because the front gutters have been talked about for several years and they seem to have a firm price on it. For $21,000.
Yeah.
So The back gutter, for those that haven't crawled around the library, there's a section of flat roof up there. The rear of it where the water comes off is not guttered. Falls 2 stories, lays right next to the foundation where the water's coming into the basement. There's also rotted out the door that's there, and the concrete apron for the door is pitched towards the building. And so the plan was to put a conventional, not copper, gutter on the rear of the building. And downspout that away from the building and then fix the pitch on the apron for the door so the water is not running towards the inside. That's when they titled, they have towels piled up on the inside to keep the water out. That's kind of the scope of the progress, but project. I'm estimating that length of gutter is like 40 feet. So 40 feet of conventional gutter with 2 stories of downspouts. And they said, well, it could be, you know,
Well,
$58,000, or it could be less or more.
I think they intended to do the entirety of the roof, of the gutter, but this I think the 22,000, if I remember correctly.
It's just
was
for the front.
And it also includes doors, they had a quote in there. For
No,
the
there's a
repair of that
separate, there's a
door.
separate quote for the door for like 1,000. They were-
It was covered in that.
They were just replacing the door, they're not
Not
fixing
addressing.
the problem of the water coming down and going under the door and splashing and, kind of thing, so. I wish they had a better quote, scope project on this, saying, well, it might be 22, and this first year could be 80,000, even more. That's like, makes it kind of tough for us to plan, what do they actually need, we want them to be successful, but we need some accurate information on this as well.
To that end, I mean, my gut's telling me there's a front gutter project that should happen.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that may be, again, this is best guess at the information submitted in the nebulous uncertainty of what's contained for scope. It may be that gets reduced to something like a $25,000 for gutters, for front gutters and
Something for the back.
and then they flesh that out and it becomes a supplemental. We push out the 50,000 as a placeholder in year 2. For continuation of gutters, perhaps, just to track it. While they come up with additional information. Rather than, I don't see, they don't have the defined $80,000 project yet, and they won't by the time you're through the plan. So. All right. Pete.
Yeah.
Town office building floors, common room upstairs. It was on the plan for year 2, it would be year 1 now, but it was not renewed. What is your thinking on that? Line 54, $35,000 for floors upstairs.
What do I think about it, not renewing it?
Well, it wasn't renewed, but it would have been a year 1. Because it was year 2 last year.
Oh. I wonder if it wasn't renewed because I thought that was already on the plan. It needs to be done, I would prefer to see that in year 2, but there's no way it's getting done this year.
Yeah, you don't need to make the call now, but I will make that move for you.
Make that move to year 2.
And if that changes, now that you're aware that it's on the plan.
Yeah, I was aware that it was on the plan, there's enough happening that it's not gonna happen. It needs to happen.
Okay, animal control, 375,000, that's year 2.
Yes, that is an administrative nightmare that will not end, but
If the regionalization doesn't go through, will the 375 pay to upgrade our?
yes, that's why it's in there. That's the 375 is the backstop of regionalization fails. If regionalization happens, then it'll be considerably less than that because I'm gonna put public works equipment in there.
If regionalization happens though, would it be in year 1 that you'd need some money?
I think. Currently, we're gonna save some money on personnel with regionalization. And we could work a deal where. We're renting space, we could rent the space from Holland and from, instead of Stafford for about the same amount, I think. We can work a deal,
Mhm.
such a deal. It's
So it'd be more of an operating budget
more of an
cost.
operating budget cost than a capital cost.
Or it could also just be a direct request to Board of Finance if it
Right.
Yes,
changes.
yeah, that, I think that's what would happen and
So,
boy,
I think planning to figure out how we have 375,000 plus all electric is a year from now, it'll cost 5% more.
Yeah,
well,
But potentially.
yeah, potentially, I think that the 375 is actually taking a lot of that into consideration. And the 375 was as planned, and I think we could save a fair amount of construction, having talked public works. And the Taj Mahal of dog pounds.
so Pete, in the next 5 years, you don't think anything needs to happen to this building or to the old town hall?
Boy Scout.
We have, the old town hall and the Boy Scout hall right now have current contracts. I walked through with the contractor yesterday. On what we're gonna do for the current fixes. And I wanna see where we get with the current fixes before I plan the next set of fixes. So I don't know about those two buildings.
Mhm.
With the dog pound, I think we can work deals with our surrounding towns to get through to at least year two,
Mhm.
at least year two.
Okay,
And
and this
and a lot of,
building?
what?
Nothing, this building is good?
Right now it's a hazardous waste site from
Mhm.
rodent droppings and the furnace is not working.
Oh, my God.
The mice ate the entire control panel out of the furnace.
Nice,
So, and we gotta reroute the water for public works out of that building and directly to public works to make that work, so. Once we fix all that, then we had, what initiated all this is, the Department of Agriculture, which runs animal control, has completely changed all their requirements for animal control facilities.
We're still, I'm sorry, I thought the rodent thing was here.
No, the rodent thing was
Still talking
here,
about animal.
we're still putting rodents here,
That's what I thought too.
Mhm.
no, the rodent thing is at the animal control. Apparently, somebody left a 50-pound bag of dog food open and it got converted to mouse droppings.
Nice.
Mouse,
No.
Or
okay.
mice.
Yes,
Mhm.
There's no HVAC replacement, nothing, there's no equipment that's reaching the end of its life that you can see, like, I'm just.
well, we don't have HVAC, we just have put new furnaces in at both the old town hall and the Boy Scout hall and we're gonna probably need something at the animal control facility eventually, but that would all get worked into the upgrade because we're not heating the dog runs appropriately, so. We will also have to air condition under the new guidelines. And build a separate cat facility.
The other question I had for you, Pete, you mentioned the K-War property being a year one urgent.
Yes, that's for legal. So I think that's an operating budget instead of capital budget.
Okay, that's like a.
That's a legal
It's a
piece
legal
thing.
thing, it's not a.
No.
Agent site cleanup thing. it's a-
No,
Okay,
I think all the emergency remediation has been done. The reason we need the legal money is to make sure that we can, well. In an attempt to not have to pay back the state for what they've already paid on that.
okay, so no infrastructure related.
No.
capital.
No, not for a year.
That's a budgetary item, perfect. Reval, the next ones are pretty straightforward, reval, that's just captured as they requested, replenish open space fund, that is in there as requested currently, and then 20,000 this year. Plan of conservation and development, we can talk about, that is 40,000 in year two. But that was internal, I don't know whether it's worth us capturing or tracking like another $60,000 following year. Cause I don't know where that goes, whether it's gonna be internally done, whether Board of Finance is gonna prefer that really be in contract with an outside company, whether there's gonna be
Does
savings.
that work, I think the plan of conservation and development is one of those things that needs to be done, what, every 10 years?
yeah,
Correct.
so if it has to be done in 2028,
It seems to me that we should be running that the same way we run the funding for the assessor, the assessment.
except it's not that as much money as the assessment,
No, but
so,
Yeah, it's $100,000 every 10 years-ish,
yeah.
maybe. At any rate, planning for that though, I don't know whether $40,000 may not get the whole job done. It depends on whether
Right,
everybody decides that it's done in-house, done out of house.
but we don't need it in year one, do we?
No, it's for 40,000 year two. I'm just
It's in year
wondering-
one.
Well, it's in year one.
It was my mistake. My mistake.
Like,
Should have been a year two.
Like it probably doesn't, it could even be year three if it's 2028.
yeah,
Yeah, it was requested in year two. It should have been in there. I apologize. That's my miss.
Although depending on the timeline of their project, you could almost split it like you do with the rebound,
Probably
20 and 20, if the double's still 40.
Well, and that's kind of where I was going with it. I wonder whether it's worth, okay, 40 there, let's do
It looks like
40.
they need it 2028.
Did we put another 60,000 as a placeholder there just for the unknowns, so to track it? Because I don't think that 40 may not do it. It may not. Placeholder,
When you do that, do you know, like, that it's our recommendation, because
well,
I
the
can
plan
see
becomes
sitting
our
here-
recommendation, as we approve it.
well, I mean, adding money, like adding things that people didn't request. Because if we're looking at that $60,000 and the people that submitted the 40,000, they're like, we didn't ask for that, or like. I'm just wondering how that gets tracked.
So I'm just responding to what Mike had kind of said in his email, that the 40,000 was just to put it on our radar. His request said it runs typically $75,000 to $100,000. If done internally by his company, that's the $40,000. Steph had, described some hesitation with that.
Yeah.
It's been done, I don't know what the last time was, I wasn't here, but, from a planning perspective, I think $100,000 line item is the worst case.
I'm not sure I care either way, I just wanna make sure that. If we're adding something that someone didn't request, we understand and remember the evolution.
Christina, what have you done historically? with stuff like that?
Historically, we just use what they've asked for.
Okay.
Because. You know. It never is exactly what people think it's gonna be, but.
Yeah.
As they get more information, it'll change, but that's not gonna be for another couple of years, but.
Probably might be renewed next year, it might be $100,000 next year, we don't.
Yeah, we don't know.
So we can plan for what they requested.
Yeah, we can just take it literally.
Okay,
I think it's low too, but.
And to know exactly when they need the money.
Mhm.
yeah, I think they'll have more detail or probably a fuller request for next year's CIP. It's a year two request currently, so I think it can stay for the time being.
I mean, based on Mike Tomato's email, they said they're planning to submit a second request in 27-28 for 40 to 60,000 to get the budget where it needs to be if they go with an onsite contractor.
So it'll come next year because of that. And then last but not least, our senior center projects. This is another one we can discuss and you guys can say what you want. It sounded like the toilet room doors are an accessibility issue. I flagged it as, it's also low value. I put it as year one. They also seem to have, I don't know if any of these are ready to go. But I've kind of tracked them and thrown some in the out years, just to track the generator, because the generator and the toilet room renovation, oh, that's one thing I did do, sorry. The toilet room renovations conversions, they had that jointly with the generator as a oddly combined request, just to the long-term planning. I made them two separate projects to track here, because the generator is a self-contained project, and I split them out because I think it's something they're gonna wanna refine down the line.
Could they put them together because it's the same
They were-
estimate?
They were no, they weren't even, they were like long-term planning considerations.
Okay.
They had quotes for a generator in there, but the request was for like 100 to 150,000.
Right.
I'm doing this, I'm taking best guess. I tracked them separately, they're both out in years 4 and 5. As is the 15-seat transit bus, I put it at year 4, because it's not an imminent need. And I think they have some additional due diligence that they're probably going to do in the years, and ideally we can follow up with them in the off season and say, how do we,
So
how do we develop these?
if a pickup truck is $80,000, how is a 15-seat bus 60,000?
I don't. But I do know I'm sure Troy's, well, they had used.
With the pickup truck, there's, anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 in replacement radios. Lights,
Yeah.
replacement
Yeah.
plow.
It's a heavy duty public works.
So the truck,
Mhm.
if we were to go by it today, it would probably, state contract say 40,000, the number. But you might spend another 30 outfitting that vehicle.
Mhm.
Where their bus will come in, other than seats in the back, there's really not much to do with it.
15 years ago, police cruisers, half the cost was the cruiser, half the cost was outfitting it after.
But it sounded like they had some options, perhaps working with Ashford on a few times a
I'm
year.
sorry, the 80,000 was the EMS truck, right?
That was,
Sorry, I didn't mean to attribute that to public works. That
Yeah.
was- So yes, that's the reason.
okay.
That being
I
said,
just thought it seemed like
5
a
years
lot.
from now, I don't know whether a van's still gonna cost $40,000 to $60,000, but well, yes, that's not a concern for today.
No.
I think that's all my notes, with the exception if there were a couple of holdovers, Donna, just a question for you. They're not on this because I caught them drawing through my notes. The MS4 stormwater mapping funding from LoSiP, there were two $20,000, 1819 and 1920. I think we talked about them and you were gonna see where they landed, or if they're done. But I think that'll come up. I guess what we do to table 2.
Yes.
With the current fund balance and what projects are still sitting in there. That's another note. Develop. Okay. So long story short, these are the numbers for year 1, and it's loose and it's based on, where I have them assigned currently for 930 versus Fund 04 versus whatever. The bulk of this number is the Fund 04 transfer. What the hell am I? I'm confusing myself. I'm in year 2, that's why I'm confusing myself. I'm in year 3, there it is. All right, so year 1. The bulk of this local spending total is the transfers that we have now, 2 million. If
Are you talking about the 3 million number?
I'm talking about the 294, the total local spending. There's 2974623, line 71 and line 79 is tallied again. That is year 1, that is the local spending. 2.4 million of that is just the transfer capital reserve. 1.375 for the schools, and we have $1 million and change for town projects. that can be totally massaged how we need to from a long-term perspective. You'll see that it kind of goes, right now, we don't have any transfers recurring in out years for school projects. We don't have any really significant savings towards these larger big ticket items, so that's the fund balance, that's the next step of this. This is just the initial snapshot. As it's kind of captured in there currently. So,
So Jim, I was trying to remember last year.
Yeah.
Last year, we did the 1.375.
31,000.
Yeah, so 1.375 to the schools, 31,000 to the general.
Yeah.
Town fund. And then when we looked at this year, we said 500 to the schools and 1,056,600. And did we do that because it was like a 10% increase?
Because we thought the bond was gonna hit,
Yeah,
and that it was the $12 million in ventilation, that was what was being discussed at the time.
but why did we come up with 1,056,600? Cause
I wanna
I feel like it was an escalator off of the
I
total.
think it was either a 10% or a 7% escalator off of
Yeah.
off of the total, yeah, I
Yeah.
think you're right. What that target becomes is something we have to
Yeah,
decide. From a
yeah,
long-term perspective, which was also part of, what I had talked to the Board of Ed prior to this,
Mhm.
thinking about how do we approach long-term, so there's a larger discussion here.
Yeah.
Not probably gonna solve it all this year.
right,
But what we need to do, I think, is look at, we have a lot of projects in year two currently.
mhm,
A lot of engineering, there's $1 million in engineering. For road work. And we have 100,000 and change in Fund 04 currently. So,
and from a workflow perspective, I'm not comfortable putting all of that into 1 year because it's too hard for one person to manage that and make those things
Yeah.
happen. So we would be tying up the money and it probably won't happen. So we should just be realistic about that
yeah,
and
absolutely.
spread it out so that it's not all in one time anyhow, but still,
Yeah, we can slide things around. That's the next steps.
yeah,
This was as submitted, so, I don't wanna. My goal was not to move things around or prejudge or make assumptions, it's really. This is our task for the next couple of weeks, is figuring out what we're moving, understanding what the impact of the bottom line is.
Is there a timeline on the UAG grant when that needs to be spent by?
It's a fairly long term thing.
Okay.
The drawbacks in each grant would be considerable. This one is particularly good to us.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the way Troy. Had spoken about it, they want to do the Village Hill project to get their feet wet. One engineering at a time, one construction at a time, so. I think that.
I think as part of our thinking was we wanted to do something.
Yeah.
We've been sitting on these projects for.
Yeah.
30 years.
I didn't know if doing the $500,000 of engineering for Schofield Road and the construction for 1.25.
Well, I was just playing,
Could happen in the same year or not.
realistically, I think I only had one line item to put this stuff under, I can separate it as a grant.
I think because. What it is it's two different sets of people doing it and none of it's in-house, so perhaps it could get done in 1 year.
So what happens there, the way I inputted it in here now, or input. Engineering is 500,000. The 1.25 is the balance of the grant, right? So that's basically just paying down the principal.
And then the bond.
For the bond payment is that 160,000 a year, and you just follow that grant maybe in the next year out, would be at the same time.
And
Or-
splitting it so that you use some of the grant for engineering. Complicates the whole thing
Yeah.
tremendously. As far as reporting to the state goes.
They like to pay for construction.
Yeah.
They, not only that, but the bid processes and all that for each project increase exponentially.
Yeah, I mean, the Village Hill in year one and construction in year two, I think is pretty good. I think engineering in year two for the Cookville Road. So that the grant can continue to be drawn down on is probably good. I think the other road projects in the salt shed can probably be longer term planning and funding strategy discussions and can maybe be pushed out like we've done. But maybe we try to figure out or present a plan that plans for them. Because they need to start getting addressed. So if we're gonna do it, I'd suggest, you know, again, pushing the salt shed out. And I don't know how we feel about Liska, but that's another one that,
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
certainly, Mike, go ahead.
Yes, Mike McCoo, Clover Springs. As valuable as this discussion is, we're starting to delve into debating merits of things, and that's conducting business, which is not an informational meeting. So I would just ask you be cognizant of that fact and not be conducting the business of the committee.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. I don't know at what point discussion turns into business.
I don't either, so why don't we?
Usually
why
when
don't we
it's involved
shy
in a
away?
vote.
Yeah, my assumption was we're not conducting business, we're not moving or action, that's what and it's being done on Board of Finance, but. At that rate, yes, so there's a lot to digest here, this is the first pass, guys, if there are suggestions, Donna, I think I'd like to. Work through the fund balances
Yes,
between this week and next, so that we can present an update to this, and maybe.
I think we all have plenty to digest here, so let's go to.
Well, one thing I would suggest, and I suggest everybody write on your thing now, is the date, because as this goes on, we're gonna have different versions of
In the
this.
upper left corner.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
Oh, there it is.
Yes.
Alright.
Only on page one, unfortunately. Oh, no, I made it on to page two. And page three,
Awesome,
it's all in there.
because the other, get a minute. Well,
Well, this thing, to be honest with you, the spreadsheet is. It's unmanageable to print and plot, like this
Yeah.
is me stretching to make it
Mhm.
legible on a page. There's something broken in it.
I do
That
love the
doesn't
effort
format.
for making it bigger.
Yeah,
So with that said, does this 2-page look generally work for you, even if it becomes?
yeah,
a
Yeah,
manual?
it's good.
yeah,
And then I'm not gonna talk too much about the 10-year plan now, but the 10-year factor, but I think there are some things that we can hold and will not hit the plan, present it to the public. But. You know, that's ultimately in our final approved plan document. But at least we are tracking them and can understand that they need to move forward, and quite frankly, they may factor into what we recommend for capital reserve funding moving forward. Over 5 years, over 10 years, whatever the case may be.
Jim, is there a way to calculate, potential mill rate increase as we work through this?
I don't think we want to do that. It's what.
Oh, yeah. I'll be happy to do it.
Yeah, I mean, we can, so it.
That was another line, probably in the middle of page 2 of, where it talks about what we're spending total. I know you've given us some figures of,
Yeah, we
one
get
mill's like 400.
482,000 based on the last year's budget, so yeah, I mean, that's a factor we can do, I don't know. You guys tell me, I mean, is that? Germane to,
I think that's probably strictly a Board of Finance function, number one.
that's my
And number two, with the change in the grand list, it's gonna be, which we don't have final numbers on, means
yeah,
we're just shooting in the dark anyway.
no, I think that's where my gut's heading with it too, is that it's not. Really, it's not, we can recommend spending, the impact really the Board of Finance, we can be cognizant of it and can discuss it, but.
I to me, it's more is the local spending somewhat stable and not, up and down each year, because
Yep.
because that's what impacts taxes. So being able to see that or working towards stabilizing it is, I think, the goal.
Stabilizing, incrementalizing.
Yeah,
It's actually, I mean,
it's not too bad.
it's not too bad, in all honesty. But we have our transfer to reserve drops off.
But because we're paying bonds,
But yes, in this scenario, so that's,
yeah,
and where that falls is the complicated equation and
yes.
game of this, so. You're very familiar with this, Christina, if you have any suggestions,
Okay,
by
yeah,
all
no.
means,
No,
send them and we can discuss an update. So you both received this,
hmm,
any comments, feel free to share.
I have one question, it's more of a procedural thing for the Board of Finance or for the selectmen in terms of the. If and when potential bonds are being presented to go out, are those voted on at town meeting or referendum or both, or is it just,
Probably referendum.
or is it just lumped into the annual budget?
No.
oh, no.
These are projects that the town signs off on.
Yeah, I believe that it goes to town meeting, at which point it's discussed, and then it's,
Well, because the use.
can be, well, it starts at the Board of Finance, it comes to us, and then it goes to town meeting, where the town generally decides to send it to referendum.
Yeah, either the selectmen can decide just to send it to referendum, or someone could pass a petition demanding that it go to referendum. And with something like this, I
would
would.
go to
assume
referendum.
It would go to referendum.
So we're just, again, any of these things are just. Planning. The implementation, then this is, and that's what I'm trying to get at, the recommendations here are this committee's recommendations to achieve a plan. That then becomes information that is used by Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen to. Implement as based on those recommendations as they feel warranted. But my personal opinion is that the better information, the better, a providing insight as to what it would entail to achieve whatever the plan becomes is valuable information for them to use to make decisions that they need to. So to the extent that we can say this is what we have on the list, and if there's anything on here that you guys. I'm looking, don't think they're valid projects, aren't warranted, then.
I think we should have some time to digest, and so we can do that on our own. Let's move to public to speak, so I can.
Any further thoughts before Pete leaves the room?
No,
All right. Moving on then, present to speak. There's nobody in the room still, so if you're online, please feel free to raise your hand, unmute yourself, and just identify yourself for the record. Pete, we made you wait, so I'm gonna let you talk. Go ahead.
Good evening, Peter Latinchich, 97 Trask Road. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Great. A couple of comments. On a small scale end of things, I want to ask about the status of the ARPA ambulance that we obtained with ARPA funds. I'd asked this previously, and I want to make sure that this did not enter the capital project schedule, because we've always had one ambulance, and I don't know why we have two or why temporary funds were used for it, but I'm hoping that doesn't creep into a replacement schedule. Secondly, I'm concerned about the way some of these projects are being presented, and the gutters were a good example tonight, where $80,000 sounds like a lot of money for gutters to the average person. And I would think it behooves the applicant for these funds to have, recognizing this is capital budgeting, somewhat realistic numbers, not just throw numbers out there to inflate the capital plan. On a larger scale, I'm deeply concerned about the plan you're presenting for local funds. The town absorbed a major increase in the shock absorber fund, as it's called. In the first year, when it put aside $1 million, that increased to $1.5 million. The town went with that as well. And now we're looking at that doubling to almost $3 million based on what I see Jim presenting tonight. That's a substantial increase in taxes. And I don't think it's one that our community can afford. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete. Again, just to clarify, this is a first pass as submitted. This is not a plan being presented by this committee. This is where it's at this moment in time on the 19th of February. So thank you. Mike McCoo, I saw you next.
Mike McCoo, Clover Springs. During the line by line review, which was very good and detailed, good learning process. Thank you. I noticed there was some discussion about the Wellington Hill Fire Department's $110,000 project, if you want to call that. And I believe it got divided into 10,000 for surveying and 100,000 for the rest of it. I believe and I don't have notes in front of me, I wasn't expecting to see that to do the research on it, but I believe this is something that is an existing project that the plan is looking to track the status of it right now. And in which case it's already been approved by the taxpayers. So I'm not sure how it gets split now into two projects. And if I remember the legwork that was done in due diligence to create that project originally, the estimates given for the surveying work were $8,000 to $12,000 at the time, which was a year or two ago. And that was based on not knowing exactly what scope of survey work was going to be done, depending on the request of either planning and zoning or the potential future various committees, what projects and stuff, if it was going to have to be an A2 level, T2 level survey, etc. Just want to point that out, that I think it's already a previously approved project, in which case it's ancient history for CIP, except for tracking purposes, obviously. And I think it should just stay at $110,000 as it was approved by the taxpayers. But if I have some of those details wrong, then absolutely we can address that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I'll look into it further. I'm only going off of what the design, the portal, the Open Gov portal submissions came in as. They were submitted as two separate numbers in the CIP system.
Okay, so that may be, my recollection may be incorrect.
Or it may be that it was approved separately and I did something incorrect. So I'll look into it and see what the proper approach is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ralph.
Ralph Tillis, 47 Village Hill Road. I have a question about bonding. You've obviously delved into that quite a bit. Are you capturing the cost to initiate a bond?
No, not currently. No.
Because there is an upfront cost.
Yeah.
For a bond, and that number can be substantial depending upon the size of the bond. I just want to make sure we're cognizant of that fact. I do have some critiques on some of the other items, but this is not the time or the place to get into it. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Ralph. Pretty much everybody online. Anybody else going once, going twice?
Move to adjourn.
There it is.
Second.
I was trying to get it out before you said it.
I was timing.
Who seconded that? Just for the record?
Oh, we can't even vote, can we?
Wow.
Moving to adjourn.
right.
Thank you, everybody.
We all just leave.
Meeting ended at 8 p.m. Lisa, and that was Peter. Moving to adjourn and Jen seconding. Thank you.
I answered your email, that's a good thing. I took the class game last week. Yeah.
I did, yeah. I didn't know you were taking it.
Yeah, we still